I watched my sister's trembling hands tear open the acceptance letter from Stanford, my acceptance letter, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Oh my God!" Sarah shrieked, waving the envelope like a trophy. "I got in! I actually got in!" Mom rushed over, mascara already running down her cheeks. "My baby! My brilliant baby!" She swept Sarah into her arms while Dad stood behind them, chest puffed with pride. I stood in the doorway of my own room, watching them celebrate in the hallway. None of them noticed me. They never did. "This is from the special arts program," Sarah breathed, scanning the letter. "Full scholarship, housing included, mentorship with Professor Chen." My stomach twisted. Professor Chen. In my first life, that mentorship had changed everything for me. Her connections had opened doors I'd never imagined, and Sarah was holding the letter meant for my portfolio, my essay, my dreams. "We need to celebrate," Dad announced. "Dinner at Marcello's." "Can Emma come?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She finally looked at me, her eyes glittering with malicious victory. "Of course she can come," Mom said, not even glancing my way. "She should see what hard work and dedication can achieve. Maybe it'll inspire her to actually try for once." I smiled, a real smile, though they'd interpret it as bitterness. "Congratulations, Sarah, you deserve this." And I meant it, because in my first life, I'd fought tooth and nail for that Stanford acceptance. I'd poured my soul into my art portfolio, spent 2 years perfecting my technique, written essays that bled vulnerability and truth. And when I'd gotten in, Sarah had been so consumed with jealousy that she'd destroyed my life piece by piece. She'd sabotaged my scholarship by forging emails to the financial aid office. She'd stolen my acceptance packet and burned it. She'd convinced our parents I was lying about getting in at all. Then she'd applied as a transfer student using my portfolio, the one she'd secretly photographed, and my essay structure, which she'd found in my laptop's cloud backup. By the time I discovered what she'd done, it was too late. Stanford had rescinded my acceptance for fraudulent documentation after Sarah reported me for theft of her work. Our parents had believed her instantly. They always did. I'd spiraled into depression, dropped out of community college, worked dead-end jobs for 3 years while Sarah lived my dream, studying under Professor Chen, building connections, launching her art career on the foundation of my stolen work. Then, on my 23rd birthday, I'd overdosed on sleeping pills. An accident, the coroner had ruled. But in those final moments, drowning in darkness and regret, I'd known the truth. I'd given up. And then I'd woken up, 10 years younger, in my childhood bedroom, the morning of my 18th birthday. 3 months before college acceptance letters would arrive. I'd thought I was going insane. Checked myself into therapy, convinced I was having a psychotic break. But the details were too precise, too real. I knew things I couldn't possibly know. The earthquake that would hit Jakarta in 6 weeks, the celebrity scandal that would break in 2 months, the questions on my upcoming AP exams, word for word. It took me 3 weeks to accept the impossible truth. I'd been reborn. And this time, I knew exactly who my sister really was. "Earth to Emma?" Sarah snapped her fingers in front of my face, jolting me from my thoughts. "I asked if you've heard back from any schools yet?" The dinner table at Marcello's went quiet. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me. Mom, Dad, Sarah, and Sarah's boyfriend Marcus, who'd joined our celebration. "A few," I said mildly, cutting into my chicken piccata. "And?" Mom prompted, her tone suggesting this was a tedious formality. "State school accepted me, and City Community College." Sarah's laugh was bright and cutting. "Well, that's something. Not everyone can be Stanford material, right?" "Right," I agreed, meeting her eyes. She looked so triumphant, so secure in her victory. She had no idea, because I hadn't just gotten into state and city community. Those applications had been decoys, sent early with deliberately mediocre portfolios. I'd spent the last 3 months working on something else entirely. In my first life, I hadn't known about the Rothmore Institute. It wasn't a traditional school. It was an elite arts conservatory in Florence that accepted only 12 students worldwide each year. Graduates didn't just work in the art world, they defined it. 3 of the last 5 winners of the prestigious Biennale residency had been Rothmore alumni. Professor Chen had told me about it during one of our mentorship sessions. Except in that life, Sarah had been the one sitting across from her, soaking up every word I should have heard. Sarah had applied to Rothmore in my first life and been rejected. Her portfolio, even with my stolen work as its foundation, hadn't been good enough. The Institute's admission committee could spot a derivative artist from a mile away, but I wasn't derivative, and this time I'd known exactly what they were looking for. I'd spent 3 months creating a portfolio that drew from everything I'd learned in my first life. All the techniques Professor Chen would have taught me, all the artistic evolution I'd seen in Sarah's career, my career stolen, all the raw emotion of living and dying and being given a second chance. I'd poured my rage and grief and desperate hope into 12 pieces that burned with authenticity. The application had asked for a personal essay about artistic truth. I'd written about death, about looking into the void and seeing not just darkness, but the outline of who you could have been, about being given the opportunity to become that person. I'd submitted it 6 weeks ago. Rothmore's early decision notifications went out in 2 days. You know what the best part is? Sarah was saying, leaning into Marcus. Stanford's program has partnerships with galleries in LA and New York. Professor Chen already reached out about summer internships. Can you imagine? Me interning at the Guggenheim. You've worked so hard for this, Mom said, squeezing Sarah's hand. You deserve every bit of success coming your way. I nodded along, playing my part. Forgettable Emma, mediocre Emma, Emma who would fade into the background of Sarah's brilliant story. Except this time, I was writing my own story, and Sarah was about to realize she'd stolen a consolation prize. The next 2 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah paraded around the house with her acceptance letter, showing it to relatives on video calls, posting artfully filtered photos on Instagram with captions about dreams coming true and hard work paying off. Each post got hundreds of likes and comments from people congratulating her, telling her how talented she was, how they'd always known she'd do great things. I stayed quiet, watched, waited. On the third day, I woke at dawn and checked my email before anyone else was up. There, nestled between spam and a newsletter from the local art supply store, was an email from admissions at rothmore.edu. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Miss Emma Chen, it is with tremendous pleasure that we offer you admission to the Rothmore Institute's class of 2026. I read it 3 times. Then I read the attached letter detailing the full scholarship, the stipend for living expenses in Florence, the private studio space, the mentorship with Elena Vasari, the most influential art curator in Europe. Then I closed my laptop and went downstairs to make breakfast. Sarah stumbled into the kitchen at 9, still wearing her Stanford hoodie. She'd ordered it the day after her acceptance, along with matching sweatpants, a tote bag, and a car decal. Morning, I said, sliding scrambled eggs onto her plate. She grunted and pulled out her phone, scrolling through comments on her latest Instagram post. Can you believe I have 2,000 followers now? It's insane. Crazy, I agreed. Oh, she looked up, eyes glittering. I totally forgot to tell you. Professor Chen wants to meet before the semester starts. She said she's really impressed with my portfolio, specifically the Fragments series. Her smile was pure poison. You know, the one with the broken mirrors and the symbolism of fractured identity? The Fragments series. I'd created it in my first life during a particularly dark period, using shattered mirrors to explore the feeling of being broken into pieces by your own family. It had been my most personal work, the piece that had caught Professor Chen's attention and secured my acceptance. Sarah had photographed it one night when I was out. In my first life, she'd destroyed the originals after submitting the photos as her own work. That sounds amazing, I said. I'm sure she'll love working with you. She already does. Sarah took a bite of eggs. She said I have a unique voice and raw, emotional honesty. Those were her exact words. I swallowed my rage and smiled. You must be so excited. I am. Though honestly, I'm a little nervous too. Stanford is so competitive, and I'll be surrounded by the best artists in the country. You'll do great, I assured her. You're very talented. She preened under the compliment, missing entirely that I hadn't said talented artist. Because Sarah wasn't talented, not really. She was technically competent when she tried, decent at mimicking styles she saw online, but she had no original vision. No authentic voice. That's why she'd always needed to steal mine. In my first life, her career built on my stolen work had eventually crumbled. 5 years after Stanford, she'd been exposed when another artist recognized my style in her portfolio and started asking questions. The scandal had ruined her, but by then, I'd been too deep in my own darkness to feel vindicated. This time would be different. This time, I'd be there to watch her fall. "What are you doing today?" Sarah asked, interrupting my thoughts. "Job applications, probably. Need to start saving for community college." She nodded absently, already bored with my mundane life, and returned to her phone. I waited until she went back upstairs. Then I took out my own phone and called the Rothmore Institute's admissions office. "Hello, this is Emma Chen. I'm calling to confirm my acceptance and enrollment for the fall semester." The pieces were all in place. Now, I just needed to wait for the perfect moment. That moment came 2 weeks later at Sarah's going away party. Mom had invited everyone: relatives, family friends, Sarah's teachers, the neighbors who'd watched her grow up. Our backyard was packed with people congratulating Sarah on Stanford, telling her how proud they should be, asking for photos. I circulated through the crowd with a tray of appetizers, invisible as always. Perfect. "Emma!" Aunt Marie caught my arm. "I heard you're going to state. That's wonderful, honey." "Actually, I'm taking a gap year," I lied smoothly. I'd been telling everyone that for the past week, laying groundwork. Going to work and save money. "Oh." Her face fell with practiced sympathy. "Well, college isn't for everyone. You'll find your path." "I'm sure I will," I said, moving on before she could offer more platitudes. I found Mom in the kitchen, arranging a cake decorated with Stanford's logo. "Need help?" She barely glanced at me. "No, I've got it. Can you make sure Sarah's ready? We're doing the cake in 5 minutes." Sarah was in her room, touching up her makeup. She'd changed into a new dress for the party, red, form-fitting, expensive. "Zip me up?" she asked when I appeared in their doorway. I crossed the room and slowly pulled the zipper up her back. In my first life, this had been a moment of genuine sisterly affection, back when I'd still believed she loved me. Now I felt nothing but cold calculation. "You look beautiful," I said truthfully. "Everyone's going to want pictures." "I know." She checked herself in the mirror one final time. "God, I can't believe this is really happening. Stanford, Professor Chen. Everything I've ever wanted." "Everything you've worked so hard for," I echoed. She met my eyes in the mirror, and for just a second, I saw it, the flash of guilt, the knowledge of what she'd done. Then she blinked, and it was gone, replaced by her practiced smile. "Come on," she said. "Let's go celebrate." The cake ceremony was exactly as orchestrated as I'd expected. Sarah stood in the center of the crowd, glowing under everyone's attention, while Mom and Dad made speeches about how proud they were, how they'd always known she was destined for greatness. "To Sarah!" Dad raised his glass, "the first in our family to go to Stanford." Everyone cheered. Sarah beamed. I clapped politely from the edge of the crowd. Then, perfectly timed, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and let my eyes widen. My hands started to shake, just slightly, but enough that the people near me noticed. "Emma?" Aunt Marie touched my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I looked up at her, then at the crowd, then at Sarah, who was watching me with confused irritation at having her moment interrupted. I shook my head, laughed a little wildly. "I'm sorry, this is crazy timing. I should—" "What is it?" Mom demanded, annoyed. I took a breath, let it tremble. I got an email from a school." Sarah's expression darkened. "What school?" I didn't think I'd actually get in. It was a long shot. I applied on a whim. I didn't even tell anyone because— "What school?" Sarah's voice had gone sharp. I turned my phone screen toward the crowd. "The Rothmore Institute?" The silence was immediate and complete. "You applied to Rothmore?" Sarah's voice came out strangled. "What's Rothmore?" Dad asked. Professor Martinez, Sarah's AP art teacher, gasped. "Rothmore? The Rothmore Institute in Florence?" "I don't understand," Sarah said loudly. "Emma doesn't even— she's not serious about art. She's taking a gap year. The Rothmore Institute," Professor Martinez was explaining to the confused crowd, "is the most prestigious art conservatory in the world. They accept 12 students a year, 12 total, globally." She stared at me. "You got in." Full scholarship, I heard myself say, and a stipend, and mentorship with Elena Vasari. Elena Vasari, Professor Martinez repeated faintly. The Elena Vasari? The crowd erupted into chaos. Everyone talking at once, some congratulating me, others asking questions. A few looking between Sarah and me with dawning understanding. Sarah's face had gone white. Let me see that, she demanded, snatching my phone. She read the email, her hands shaking. Then she read it again. Then she looked at me with something that might have been hatred or fear or disbelief. How? She whispered. How did you? You barely even do art. You've never shown anyone your work. I've been working on a portfolio for months, I said quietly, for her ears only. While you were so busy celebrating your Stanford acceptance, I was creating something real, something mine. Her eyes filled with tears. Stanford is supposed to be the best, I finished. For most people, maybe. But Rothmore is different. It's not about prestige or name recognition. It's about actual talent. Raw, authentic, artistic vision. I paused. The kind of thing you can't steal. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Oh my God, Emma! Mom pushed through the crowd, her face a complicated mix of emotions. Why didn't you tell us you were applying? This is incredible. I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up, I said, playing the modest card, including my own. The acceptance rate is less than 1%. 1%, Dad repeated, looking dazed. And you got in? I can show you the portfolio if you want. It's in my room. Yes, Professor Martinez said immediately. I'd love to see it. I've never actually met a Rothmore acceptee before. The party transformed. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me, to see my work, to hear about Rothmore. Sarah stood frozen in the center of the crowd, still holding my phone, while people gradually stopped paying attention to her. I led Professor Martinez and a handful of others upstairs to my room. I'd prepared for this moment, had my 12 portfolio pieces arranged on my walls and desk. They were better than anything I'd created in my first life, informed by years of stolen experience, yes, but authentic in a way Sarah's derivative work could never be. Professor Martinez walked slowly around the room, examining each piece in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was reverent. Emma, these are extraordinary. The technical skill is impressive, but the emotional depth. She paused at my final piece, a mixed media sculpture of a phoenix rising from ashes made of burned photographs and shattered glass. This is the kind of work that defines a generation. Thank you, I said quietly. How long have you been creating like this? My whole life, I answered honestly. I just never showed anyone before. Why not? I glanced toward the door where I could hear Sarah's voice raised in anger downstairs. I guess I was waiting for the right moment. When we returned to the party, Sarah was arguing with Mom in the corner of the yard. Not fair. She's been hiding this whole secret talent while I've been... Shh, keep your voice down, Mom hissed. People are watching. I don't care. This is supposed to be my party, my moment, and she's ruining it just like she ruins everything. Sarah! Dad's voice was sharp with warning. But Sarah was beyond caring. She whirled to face me as I approached, her face blotchy with tears and rage. You did this on purpose, she accused. You waited until my party to announce it. You wanted to humiliate me? I didn't plan this, I said calmly. The email came when it came. I'm sorry if it overshadowed your celebration. You're not sorry. You've always been jealous of me, always lurking in the background. And now you think you're better than me because you got into some pretentious European school that nobody's even heard of. Sarah, Professor Martinez said sharply, that's enough. Rothmore is not some pretentious European school. It's the pinnacle of artistic education. Most professional artists would give anything for the opportunity Emma has been given. Sarah's mouth opened and closed. But Stanford is an excellent university with a strong arts program, Professor Martinez said. You should be very proud of your acceptance. But Rothmore is. She shook her head. There's no comparison. I watched Sarah crumble. Watched the realization hit her that for once, for the first time in her life, she wasn't the special one. She wasn't the talented one. She wasn't the one everyone admired. And I felt nothing but cold, perfect satisfaction. The party ended early. Sarah locked herself in her room, claiming a migraine. Mom and Dad helped clean up in strained silence, shooting me confused glances they thought I didn't notice. Aunt Marie hugged me on her way out and whispered, "I'm sorry I said college wasn't for everyone. Clearly, I had no idea who you really were." "Most people don't," I replied. When the house was finally quiet, I went to my room and sat at my desk, looking at my portfolio pieces. In 2 months, I'd be in Florence. I'd study under Elena Vasari. I'd build the career I should have had the first time around. And Sarah would go to Stanford, where Professor Chen would quickly realize that her portfolio lacked originality, where she'd struggle to keep up with genuinely talented students, where she'd eventually drop out in her junior year, just like in my first life. But this time without the foundation of my stolen work to fall back on. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called. Dad stepped inside, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" "Of course." He sat on my bed, hands clasped between his knees. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I didn't know you were serious about art. I thought you were just, I don't know, dabbling, not focused like your sister." He looked up at me. "I should have paid more attention. Should have asked what you were working on. Should have—" He trailed off. "Should have believed I was capable of more than community college?" I supplied. He flinched. "Yeah, it's okay," I said, and meant it. In my first life, this conversation would have meant everything to me. Now it was just a necessary step in the process. "You didn't know." "Because you didn't tell us." "Why didn't you tell us?" I considered my answer carefully. "Would you have believed me if I had? If I'd told you I was applying to one of the most exclusive programs in the world, would you have thought I had a chance?" His silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said gently. "So I decided to just do it and let the results speak for themselves." He nodded slowly. "Your mother's pretty shaken up about all this. She feels like she doesn't know you." "She doesn't," I said. "But that's not really her fault. I never let her in." "Why not?" "Because she would have told Sarah everything, and Sarah would have found a way to sabotage me. Because in my first life, every dream I shared with my family became ammunition Sarah used to destroy me. Because I'd learned, in the hardest way possible, that some victories require you to fight alone in the dark. But I couldn't say any of that. I guess I liked having something that was just mine," I said instead. He seemed to accept this. "Well," he said, standing up, "I'm proud of you, Emma, really proud, and I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." "Thank you." After he left, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Elena Vasari, introducing myself and expressing my enthusiasm for the mentorship. This was it, my second chance, my real life, finally beginning. From down the hall, I heard Sarah sobbing. I closed my laptop and went to her room, knocking softly. "Go away!" she called, voice thick with tears. "It's Emma." Silence, then, "What do you want?" "To talk." Another long silence. Then the door unlocked. Sarah sat on her bed, surrounded by crumpled tissues. Her eyes were red and swollen, her Stanford hoodie bunched up around her. She looked young and broken and lost. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then, I remembered everything she'd done to me, would have done to me, in the life I'd already lived. The moment passed. "I don't understand," she said. "When did you get so good? How did I not know?" I sat in her desk chair, maintaining careful distance. "I've always been good. You just never noticed." "Because you never showed anyone." "Because you never asked," I countered. "You were so wrapped up in your own stuff, your own achievements, your own life. When did you ever ask about mine?" She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew the answer. "Rothmore," she said finally. "I applied there last year for their summer intensive. They rejected me." "I know." Her head snapped up. "You know, how do you—" "I found the rejection letter in your desk when I was borrowing a stapler last month. A lie, but a believable one. The truth, that I knew, because I'd watched her career crumble in another life, would sound insane." "Then you knew it was better than Stanford," she said. "You knew, and you applied anyway, and you got in just to show me up." "No," I said firmly. "I applied because it was the right fit for my work. Because Elena Vasari's approach to contemporary sculpture, aligns perfectly with my artistic vision. Because Florence has the resources and history and culture, I need to develop my craft. You don't factor into my decision making, Sarah. You never have. That landed like a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself. Everyone's going to think Stanford doesn't matter now, that I'm not as talented as they thought. Stanford does matter. It's an incredible school. You should be proud. But you got into a different incredible school, I interrupted. One that's better for me. That doesn't diminish your achievement unless you let it. She laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. You're the one everyone's going to be talking about now. Emma the prodigy. Emma the genius artist who kept her talent hidden. Emma the special one. Is that what this is about? I asked. Being special. Yes. The word burst out of her. Do you have any idea what it's like being the older sister who's supposed to set the example? Who's supposed to be the successful one, the talented one, the one everyone's proud of? That's been my whole identity since I was 10 years old. And now you've just taken it. I could have been kind. Could have reassured her that she was still talented, still worthy, still special. Instead, I said, good. She stared at me. Your whole life, people have handed you things because you were the talented one. I continued. Teachers gave you extensions and extra help. Mom and Dad paid for your art supplies and classes and camps. Everyone made excuses when your work wasn't good enough. Told you that you just needed more time, more practice, more opportunity. And you took it all and never once questioned whether you deserved it. That's not fair. Meanwhile, I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. I taught myself techniques from YouTube videos because no one would pay for my lessons. I bought my supplies with birthday money and babysitting jobs. I practiced until 3 in the morning because that was the only time no one would bother me. And I did it all without anyone's support or encouragement or belief. I stood up. So no, Sarah, I don't feel bad about taking your identity as the special one. Because I earned mine. You were just given yours. I left before she could respond, closing the door on her shocked, tear-stained face. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur. Word of my Rothmore acceptance spread fast. First through my school, then to the local art community, then beyond. A reporter from the town newspaper interviewed me. The mayor presented me with a Young Artist Achievement Award at a city council meeting. 3 local galleries reached out about featuring my work. Sarah went quiet. She stopped posting on Instagram, stopped talking about Stanford, spent most of her time in her room, emerging only for meals she barely touched. Mom and Dad vacillated between pride in my achievement and worry about Sarah's deteriorating state. They suggested family therapy. Sarah refused. They suggested I talk to her. I refused. She just needs time to adjust, Mom said one morning, watching Sarah push scrambled eggs around her plate. This has all been a lot for her to process. It's been a lot for all of us, Dad added, looking at me meaningfully. I shrugged. I'm not responsible for Sarah's feelings. You could be more sensitive, Mom said. She's your sister. And she should be happy for me, I countered. That's what sisters do. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. You want me to be happy for you? Her voice was shaking. Fine, congratulations, Emma. I'm so happy you're going to Florence to study under one of the most influential curators in the world while I'm stuck at Stanford feeling like a fraud. You're not a fraud, Dad said automatically. Yes, I am. Sarah stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. My portfolio isn't even that good. I know it's not. Everyone knows it's not. Professor Chen probably knows it too, and she's going to realize she made a mistake accepting me, and... Sarah, I interrupted, stop! She turned to me, eyes wild. Your portfolio is fine, I said. It's technically competent. You'll do okay at Stanford as long as you actually put in the work instead of coasting on being the talented one. But you need to stop comparing yourself to me. We're different artists with different strengths. Accept that. How am I supposed to accept that you're better? She demanded. By realizing that life isn't a competition. That someone else's success doesn't require your failure. That you can be good without being the best. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then she grabbed her plate and left the kitchen, food untouched. That was harsh, Mom said quietly. That was honest, I corrected. In my first life, I would have apologized. Would have made myself smaller to make Sarah feel bigger. Would have sabotaged my own success to preserve her fragile ego. Not this time. 2 weeks before I left for Florence, Sarah came into my room while I was packing. "I need to tell you something," she said. I looked up from the suitcase I was organizing. "Okay." She sat on my bed, picking at her cuticles. "I almost did something really bad. To you. To your Rothmore acceptance." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice calm. "What do you mean?" I thought about... She took a shaky breath. "I thought about forging an email to them, withdrawing your acceptance, or reporting you for plagiarism, or something. Anything to make this not be happening. But you didn't." "No, because..." She looked up at me. "Because I realized you'd know it was me, and you'd tell everyone. And then I really would be the fraud everyone already thinks I am." I sat down next to her. "Sarah, what everyone thinks is that you're a talented artist who got into Stanford. That's not fraud, that's success. But it's not as successful as you. So what? Since when does someone else's achievement diminish yours?" "Since forever," her voice cracked. "That's how it's always worked in this family. In every family. There's the successful kid and the forgettable one. The star and the background character. And I've always been the star. That's who I am. Without that, I'm nobody." In my first life, I'd believed that too. Had internalized that same toxic narrative. Had let it poison me until I'd destroyed myself trying to prove I was worth noticing. Now, with the clarity of death and rebirth, I could see how wrong it was. "You're Sarah," I said. "You're funny and driven and obsessed with true crime podcasts. You make the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever eaten. You're terrible at math but incredible at color theory. You're loyal to your friends even when they don't deserve it. You're all of those things whether or not you're the star of the family. Whether or not you're better than me at art. That's who you are." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to be the forgettable one." "Then don't be," I said. "Be yourself. Make your own art. Build your own career. Stop measuring your worth by comparison to other people and just exist. Create. Live." She wiped her eyes. "Is that what you did? Just decided to exist?" "Something like that," I said. Because it was true, even if she didn't know the full story. I'd died. I'd been given a second chance. And I'd decided to exist fully this time, without apology or compromise. Sarah left a few minutes later, but something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, and certainly not trust, but maybe understanding. The day I left for Florence, the whole family came to the airport. Sarah hugged me at the gate. "Make something beautiful," she whispered. "You too," I whispered back. I didn't tell her that I'd checked her social media the night before and seen that she'd finally started posting again. Not about Stanford or achievement or success, but about her actual art. Small pieces she was working on. Process videos. Honest captions about struggling with self-doubt and learning to create for herself instead of for validation. Maybe she'd make it. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I boarded the plane and didn't look back. Florence in September was everything I'd dreamed and more. The Rothmore Institute occupied a converted palazzo in the San Frediano neighborhood, all Renaissance frescoes and modern studio spaces. My cohort consisted of 12 students from 9 countries, each more talented than the last. Elena Vasari was fierce and brilliant and demanding. She pushed me harder than anyone had ever pushed me before, tearing apart my work and forcing me to rebuild it stronger. She taught me to see not just what was in front of me, but what could be, should be, would be, if I was brave enough to reach for it. I was brave enough. My first piece in Florence was a sculpture garden titled Rebirth. 12 stations exploring death, decay, transformation, and renewal. It started with ashes and ended with wings. Elena stood in front of the final piece for 10 full minutes without speaking. Then she turned to me and said, "This is what I've been waiting for. This is what Rothmore exists to nurture. This is why you're here." By the end of my first semester, my work had been featured in 2 group shows and 1 solo exhibition. A collector from Milan bought 3 pieces. A critic for Arte Italia called me the most exciting emerging voice in contemporary sculpture. I video called my parents to tell them. They were thrilled, if a bit bewildered by my sudden success. We always knew you were talented, Dad said, which was a lie, but a kind one. How's Sarah doing? I asked. Mom's face tightened slightly. She's adjusting. Stanford is challenging, but she's working hard. Professor Chen says she has potential. Potential, the word you used when someone wasn't quite good enough, but you wanted to be encouraging. I'm glad she's working hard, I said, and meant it. Tell her I said hi. After we hung up, I checked Sarah's Instagram. Her latest post was a photo of a painting she'd done for class, a self-portrait made of fractured mirrors. The caption read, "Still figuring out which pieces are really me. Progress, not perfection." I liked the post, didn't comment. Moved on with my day, because here's the thing about revenge. It's only satisfying if you let it consume you. If you spend every moment thinking about your enemy's downfall, savoring their pain, feeding off their failure. I'd done that in my first life. Let Sarah's betrayal poison everything. Let my rage at injustice burn me to ashes. This time, I chose differently. This time, I let my success be its own reward. I let my art speak for itself. I let Sarah's struggle be her own journey, separate from mine. This time, I chose to thrive instead of just survive. The real climax came 18 months later during the Venice Biennale. I'd been selected, at 20 years old, the youngest artist in the Biennale's history, to represent emerging voices in contemporary sculpture. My installation, The Phoenix Doctrine, took up an entire room in the Arsenale. It was everything I'd learned at Rothmore, every technique Elena had taught me, every emotion I'd carried through death and rebirth. The opening night was packed with critics, collectors, curators, and fellow artists. Elena stood beside me as we watched people move through the space, their faces reflecting awe and wonder, and sometimes tears. "You've done it," she murmured. "You've arrived." "I never left," I said. "I just took the long way around." She laughed. Cryptic as always. I was talking to a curator from the Tate Modern when I saw her. Sarah, standing at the entrance to my installation. She looked older, thinner, tired. She was wearing all black and no makeup. She looked nothing like the confident, vibrant girl who'd celebrated her Stanford acceptance 2 years ago. Our eyes met across the room. She raised a hand in a small, tentative wave. I excused myself from the curator and walked over. "Hi," Sarah said softly. "Hi, what are you doing here?" She gestured helplessly at the space around us. "I had to see it, your work. Everyone's been talking about it, the youngest artist in Biennale history. The genius sculptor who came out of nowhere. Emma Chen, the prodigy. I had to see if it was real." "And?" I asked. "Is it real?" She looked past me at my installation, at the sculpture of a woman breaking apart and reforming, over and over, in an endless cycle of destruction and renewal. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Thank you." She turned back to me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I dropped out of Stanford 3 months ago." I wasn't surprised. "What happened?" "I couldn't keep up. Everyone else was so talented, so original, and I was just derivative. Professor Chen tried to be nice about it, but I could tell my work wasn't good enough, wasn't real enough." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out copying other people's emotional honesty doesn't create emotional honesty of your own." "What are you doing now?" Honestly, I don't know. Working at a coffee shop in San Francisco, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not the talented one, when I'm not special." We stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the murmur of the crowd admiring my work. "I'm sorry," Sarah said suddenly, "for everything, for taking all the attention and resources and support, for making you feel invisible, for almost—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "For almost doing something unforgivable when you got into Rothmore. I'm sorry I was that person." I could have accepted the apology, could have offered forgiveness, reconciliation, a fresh start. Instead, I said, "I'm not." She blinked. "What?" "I'm not sorry you did those things, because they forced me to become this." I gestured at the installation, at the crowd, at the entire trajectory of my life. If you'd been supportive and kind, I might have stayed small, might have taken the safe path, might have never pushed myself to be this good. So thank you, actually, for being exactly who you were." Sarah's face crumpled. That's cruel." That's honest, I corrected, echoing my words from that breakfast months ago. You wanted me to be honest with you, right? To not pretend things are okay when they're not. I wanted you to forgive me. Why? So you can feel better about yourself? So you can move on without guilt? I shook my head. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to my art, my career, my life. You're not part of that equation. But I'm your sister. Biologically, yes. But being related doesn't obligate me to maintain a relationship with someone who hurt me. You had your chance to be a real sister. You chose differently. So did I. Emma, she started, but I held up a hand. I need to get back to my guests, I said. But Sarah, I genuinely hope you figure out who you are. I hope you find something that makes you happy. I hope you build a life you're proud of. I just hope you do it somewhere far away from me. I walked away without waiting for her response. Because here's what I'd learned through death and rebirth. Forgiveness is optional. Revenge is temporary. But success, real, earned, authentic success, is permanent. And I was successful. I'd taken everything Sarah had tried to steal from me in my first life and made it better, brighter, bigger, more beautiful. I'd won. Not by destroying her, though she'd managed that herself. Not by sabotaging her dreams, though Stanford had done that naturally when she couldn't keep up. But by being so spectacularly, undeniably, permanently excellent that her presence in my life became irrelevant. That night, after the Biennale opening, Elena and I sat on her balcony overlooking the Grand Canal, drinking Prosecco and watching the lights dance on the water. Your sister was there, she observed. You saw her. I see everything. She took a sip of wine. She looked broken. Yes. Do you feel guilty? I considered the question. No, should I? That depends. Did you set out to break her? No, I set out to become myself. If she broke in the process, that's on her. Elena nodded slowly. Good. Too many talented women destroy themselves trying to make room for everyone else's feelings. I'm glad you're not one of them. You taught me that, I said. I taught you to be ruthless with your art. You taught yourself to be ruthless with your life. She clinked her glass against mine. To ruthlessness, then. And to the women who choose themselves. To choosing ourselves, I agreed. 5 years later, I had my first major solo show at MoMA. The exhibition was called Ashes and Wings, the Rebirth Collection, and featured 27 pieces exploring transformation, survival, and the choice to rise. My parents flew to New York for the opening. They'd aged in the past 5 years, but they looked happy, proud. They'd finally learned who I was, and they liked what they'd discovered. Your mother cried when she saw the centerpiece, Dad told me at the reception. Happy tears, I hope. Understanding tears, Mom said, joining us. She linked her arm through mine. I finally get it. All those years you spent in your room, all those hours we thought you were wasting time, you were building this, building yourself. Yes, I said simply. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. It's okay. I didn't want you to see it sooner. I needed to do it alone. She squeezed my arm. Well, we see it now, and we're so proud. How's Sarah? I asked, because I could afford to be generous now. Mom's face clouded slightly. She's doing better. She went back to school. Art therapy this time, not studio art. She says she wants to help other people find their creativity instead of trying to be creative herself. That's good, I said, and meant it. Art therapy suited Sarah. Let her be adjacent to the art world without having to compete in it. Let her help instead of harm. She asks about you sometimes, Dad said carefully. And what do you tell her? That you're thriving, that you're happy, that you've built an incredible life. All true, I agreed. She wants to reach out, Mom said, to try again, to be sisters properly this time. I thought about it. About Sarah, broken and humbled and trying to find a new path. About the apology she'd offered at the Biennale that I'd refused. About the possibility of reconciliation, forgiveness, fresh starts. Then I thought about my life, my success, my peace, my hard-won happiness that required no one's validation, no one's approval, no one's presence but my own. Tell her I said no thank you, I said. I like my life exactly as it is. Mom looked sad but unsurprised. Are you sure? Completely. Because this was my ending, my victory, my epilogue. I was 30 years old and at the top of my field. My work hung in museums on 3 continents. I had a studio in Florence, an apartment in New York, and a cottage in Vermont where I went to think and create and breathe. And I had friends who challenged me, lovers who excited me, a career that fulfilled me. I had Elena's mentorship and the art world's respect and my own unshakable knowledge of my worth. I had everything I died wanting in my first life, and I'd gotten it without Sarah, without her support or her sabotage or her presence in my story at all. She'd tried to steal my life once. This time, I'd built a life too big and too beautiful for anyone to steal. That night, I stood in front of my MoMA centerpiece. The Phoenix Rises, a 20-foot sculpture of a woman made entirely of gold-leafed mirrors that reflected the viewer back at themselves, transformed and transcendent, and smiled. Sarah had broken down when I got a better college acceptance. But that had been just the beginning. I'd gotten a better education, a better career, a better life, better everything. And I'd done it all by choosing myself, over and over and over again. That was my revenge. That was my victory. That was my rebirth. I'd let my sister take my college acceptance, knowing I had something better waiting, and I'd been right. I'd been right about everything.